From New Jersey.
I thank you, and I thank Ranking Member Baucus and Leader Boehner for the opportunity simply to serve on this conference. I know that we gather here today to begin the process over the next, 2 or 3 weeks to work out the differences between the House and the Senate Financial Regulatory Reform Bill. But I got to be honest with you. In my opinion, these bills are so fundamentally flawed in so many serious ways and are so dangerous to the healthy functioning of our economy and to job creation going forward without addressing the actual problems at the center of the financial crisis that we could spend the next 2 or 3 years working with this base bill and still not produce a document that would be a constructive improvement on the status quo. One of the major fundamental flaws I still see with the bill is a section that empowers government bureaucrats with so-called resolution authority to shut down non-bank financial firms. Well, the bill's proponents claims that these provisions are meant to add certainty and stability to our financial system, setting up an alternative to bankruptcy for failed firms, so that there will now be a potential track of failure could go down a different track. It actually introduces a tremendous amount of uncertainty into the financial system for investors and counterparties of large financial institutions. Here's why. With the proposed resolution authority, creditors no longer will know just how their claims will be treated if the firm fails. Furthermore, this section of the legislation gives an alarming amount of power to government regulators and bureaucrats to decide the fate of a firm and its creditors. Under the administrations, we've already seen the rule of law in this country has been trampled when the federal government bullied into submission secured creditors in the Chrysler bankruptcy in favor of who? Well, politically favored unsecured creditors. Now, this legislation would codify the ability of regulators to engage in similar behavior going forward, further eroding confidence in our rules-based economy and basically sending creditors and investors overseas. Not only that, with the resolution authority and codifying a better deal than bankruptcy for some less favored creditors, it gives these firms an unfair advantage over their smaller rivals and increases moral hazard by encouraging investment in firms that otherwise don't deserve it. See, this is part of the problem that led to the demise of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, which were central to the financial crisis. You know, we already heard from the senators how Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac were not addressed at all in this Democrats' bill, but heeding to the advice of prominent voices in the White House and elsewhere, the majority has not let this crisis go to waste, tacking on provisions other than related to the core issues at hand, but basically provisions that will play well politically back at home for them. For example, thousands of companies across the country that responsibly use derivatives to engage in proper risk management are faced with the prospect, through a variety of proposals in the underlying legislation, that would either make it too expensive or literally impossible to properly hedge their risks. None of these end-users' derivative trades are systemically risky, really, including those that insurance companies use to hedge their commercial risk and to ensure that they will be there for their policyholders. But under the rules proposed by the majority here, credit to these firms will be made less available, growth will be inhibited, and jobs will be lost. And why is that? Well, because some see an opportunity to simply demonize all derivatives for the sake of, well, short-term political gain. Let me add one other thing here. I remain hopeful that some of the more egregious derivative provisions can be improved upon. I also hope that the conferees will include provision in the final conference report that received overwhelming bipartisan support in the House. That's a provision that deals with 404B. It provides smaller public companies with a permanent exemption under Sarbanes-Oxley. What it will do is promote small business growth and job creation by relieving small businesses from that unnecessary regulation, and at the same time add to the diversity of investment opportunities and free up capital by encouraging a greater number of IPOs. Now, other folks have already talked about the process. As we look at this 2,000-page document with 300 additions to it that we're opining on today, I would ask for a quick show of hands on the majority party. How many people have actually read this bill before coming here today? That speaks for itself. I know the majority has promised that they will open an open process, but at this point the majority has briefed the press on the conference process, but they have let us out of that briefing. Hopefully the process will improve over the next 3 weeks. So, let me conclude on this, Mr. Chairman. At every turn, it seems that the Democrats who wrote this bill chose to endow the same failed regulators who failed to foresee this last crisis with more power and more power. At every turn, the Democrats chose more government bureaucracy and greater government outreach into the economy. At every turn, the Democrats drew up policies that will kill jobs and restrict credit. On the other hand, this is really not surprising at all. We've seen this before, haven't before, in this Congress. We saw it with cap and trade. We saw it with health care proposals, among other proposals. On the one hand, you could say that's disappointing, that they haven't learned by now by all their repeated mistakes. On the other hand, we know that Americans across this country are delivering a strong message to those of us here in Washington. They want us to listen. They want this less failed government overreach into their lives and into the economy, and they want more opportunities to work for their families. Unfortunately, Mr. Chairman, this bill fails on all counts. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.